The 1920s is often referred to as the Roaring Twenties. It was the decade following World War I. The country was recovering financially. People were spending money, again, on such luxury as automobiles, electric appliances, and telephones. The industry was growing tremendously. It was a new age, and movie stars and sports heroes covered magazines and newspapers all over the country, replacing the gloom and the despair of the war. Some of the things that happened in this decade often reflect our world today. I want to talk about the three major events that occurred during this period. The first one was the Equal Rights Amendment, and the second one is the famous Scopes trial, the monkey trial, that took place in Dayton, Tennessee in 1925. And the stock market crash, which ended the 1920s. It was 1929. Until the 1920s, women did not have equal rights under the law. They were considered the property of their husbands. They could not vote, they had no rights of property or anything like that. The women's suffrage movement actually began in 1848. But the 19th Amendment to the Constitution finally stated that men and women were created equally and they had the same rights under the law. Women are given the rights to vote and own property, to have equal justice under the law, which is great. But sometimes in our world today, some other countries, and even in our country, women face the difference between pay and if they get a job or not, and other things like that. Around 1925, the state of Tennessee passed the Butler Act, making it illegal to teach any form of creation other than the biblical form, the biblical story of creation. The ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, opposed this idea of the Butler Act and inferred that anybody should be able to teach any type of theory of how the world was created or anything like that. But then, a substitute teacher, his name was John Wesley Scopes, in Dayton, Tennessee, was teaching kids in school that people were formed from monkeys, which he got taken to court over and was trialed and came back guilty. And it wasn't just because that they believed that it should be biblical, it was that he was teaching people evolution, and it wasn't even the right way of evolution. It was just, he thought, he had his opinion, and he was trying to tell everybody else about it. In the 1920s, might have been considered the Great Decade, but no one knew it was about to happen. Bad economic policies had led to crash of the stock market on October 24th, 1929. This was the beginning of the Great Depression. That would last for the next 10 years, and it even affects our life today. Investors lost faith in the dollar, and they started using gold. They went to the banks to retrieve their money, but the banks were already failing because so many people were getting their money, the stock markets were crashing, and the banks finally went bankrupt. Sometimes we see most of this in our world today about the money and everything else fluctuating, and sometimes people are very skeptical about banks and stuff like that because of this. And economists still fear that this could happen to us today. This was a very sad time leading up to from the 1920s to 1929, and it led to not only the stock market crash, but it was the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl and many other things like that. A lot of good and interesting things happened in the 1920s. Women won the right to vote. The battle against teaching the theory of evolution was fixed by then, and people were more carefree because World War I was over with. But in the end, many cultural activities and stuff came, and they learned a lot of new things. But at the end of the 1920s was when it really hit them, because they went through the Great Depression. And the country today still suffers from the Great Depression.